Hi everybody, it's Matt here, your local friendly vestibular migraine sufferer. So sorry it's been a while without a video. I've had a lot of stuff going on, busy with work and a few other things, so just not really had the time to slot one in. I hope you're all doing okay. I hope if you're watching this video and you're really struggling, that this video plus some of my other videos will bring you a bit of hope. And I hope if you're recovered or recovering, then you're revisiting my videos and watching this one because they're still of some use, which is great. So what I thought to do today, because we're right at the end of 2023, which is the year in which I did suffer a vestibular migraine relapse, but I recovered within 20 minutes, which you can check out the video in the link below on that one. So it was quite a pivotal year for me, really. It tested the theory that I always had, and my theory was that once I got treatment, that if I had another major vestibular episode, that I would recover, or certainly would the true effects of it would be held off by the medication and the treatments. And it proved me right, and sometimes I'm right, sometimes I'm wrong, but on this one I was very happy to be proven right. So an interesting year, I suppose, from that perspective. And given we're at the end of the year, though, as I was saying, I thought it'd be worthwhile to do a little video really that covers, I guess, the sort of main kind of key topics that I get asked the most about. So kind of the most common questions, the frequently asked questions video, really useful, I suppose, for somebody if you're just sort of starting to worry you've got vestibular symptoms, or you're not been very well and you're exploring what could be wrong with you on the internet, which we all do. Dr. Google is, of course, a double-edged sword, but we all do it. And so this kind of video might be really helpful to you. So the first major question, the most common question I get asked is, can you get better? And the answer is absolutely yes. You can and you will get better. So the way to think about it, though, is not necessarily, I can't say that you'll get cured, because, again, I don't know enough about all the medicine side, but I don't think you'll get cured. I think you're probably in a period in your life where you're always susceptible to having vestibular episodes, and that might be because of hormones, it might be because your body's changed a certain way, it might be lifestyle, whatever. But it's probably something really, rather than thinking about it being cured, it's something that I think you can get to the point where you control it and manage it to the extent where you are better and you'll just live a normal life like what I do now. And quite a number of other sufferers that I know are in the same boat as me. So it's not just me bullshitting and trying to be a charlatan, passing on some false hope. It's true. I know loads of people who've recovered quite well from vestibular situations, vestibular disorder. So the answer is yes, you can and will get better, but it's more that you'll move to a sort of point in your illness or in your life where you just manage it and completely have it all under control, which, again, I touched on me having a bit of a relapse this year. Because I've got it under control, I'm on the right meds that suit me, certainly, then doing the right things, then I could recover from it very quickly, like literally within 20 minutes, and then I never got chronically poorly afterwards. So yes, question number one, can you get better? And the answer is yes. And question number two, the second most common question I get asked, I should say, is what medication am I on, or are you on, Matt? So I am on propranolol, which is a form of beta blocker, and I'm on sertraline, which I think is called Zoloft in some parts of the world, possibly in the States. So the combination of those two meds are one of the key things that help me get better. And now I always say, and I will always remind people this every time I speak about it, that you're not suffering from anxiety. So a lot of doctors, or even your loved ones, relatives, will try and fob off what's wrong with you and saying, oh, it's just anxiety, or it's just your nerves cracking, you're just cracking up or whatever. But it's not. It's a physical illness you've got. You've got some issue with your vestibular system of some sort that is a little bit of a silent illness. We don't quite know what it is that's going off. And I've got my own theories, but I'm not going into those today. But so it's although anxiety is a major symptom, which I think most people have a vestibular disorder experience some form of horrible anxiety or low mood, for example. And that is because the vestibular system is closely interlinked with the mood system in your head, in your brain. And also that, I guess, logically thinking about it, if you have imbalance issues, then if your body thinks you're going to fall over, it will make you feel anxious. And then also go into situations where you think, for example, like going into a shop and you get the visual stimulation and the overload of the light and the motion, that is quite anxiety inducing. It's an awful, awful feeling and situation to be in. And if your your breathing's going funny as well, like mine used to, then it's bound to cause anxiety, because you're thinking, I'm going to stop breathing here and I'm going to drop dead in Tesco or whatever, which is probably that's probably what would end up to me. I'd probably end up dying in some kind of really glamorous place like Tesco or Wilco's. But anyway, so anxiety is there. It's part of the condition, but it's not anxiety is not what's wrong with you. So coming back round to the medication side, which is this question, most common question I get asked. So the sertraline was absolutely brilliant at controlling that anxiety side of the illness. So it was like, imagine pouring soothing cold water on a horrible fire. That's how the sertraline worked, and that's what it does for me. And that's the med. It is designed to do that. It is designed to tackle people with depression or anxiety problems and help them get better. But that's what means it's really crucial when you're dealing with vestibular migraine, because it is so that the vestibular disorders are so interlinked with anxiety conditions. Then once you get on top of the anxiety, then your other symptoms, you can start to tackle those. So the propranolol is more of a traditional treatment for regular migraine. So that will deal with some of the symptoms that I could get. Like I seem to remember one of the weirdest symptoms I was getting, fluctuations in my blood pressure. So that stabilizes that. So those combination of two, they're like Batman and Robin. They're like the yin and yang. They're the man and the woman, the dream couple together that have worked for me. And I appreciate different people respond in different ways to drugs, meds. So it might be you need a different combination, or it might be you actually don't suit being on meds, because I suppose not everybody does. But they are the main two. And then a little bit of research I've done since the time of me being really poorly, which was 2019, or the second time I was really poorly. There is some research out there, I understand, that suggests that sertraline does also help treat kind of migraine-y type things. So it's probably a really good one to try out if you haven't already. So propranolol and sertraline. And then the next, number 3 on 3. I should have one of those little videos that cuts in with like 3, shouldn't I? But I'm not high-tech enough. But the third most common question I get asked is kind of, how do you know you've got vestibular disorder, vestibular migraine, or how did you get a diagnosis? It's kind of the same question, really. So I think with any medical condition, you must have it diagnosed by a doctor or a specialist, because although we can learn a lot about the human body and about different ailments and conditions that are out there, we can't really self-diagnose. We're not medical professionals, as you'll see in the disclaimer in my video. So it's really important to get a diagnosis, I think, from a professional, because then that opens up the road then to getting treated and feeling better. So it's a really crucial stage. But I understand, though, it's quite hard to get that diagnosis sometimes, because you have GPs who don't know anything about vestibular disorder or vestibular migraine, or they know very little. And as I've already touched on, you have the old boring, tired taboo that, oh, it's actually you're just poorly with anxiety, that's sort yourself out, that bullshit, basically. So it is quite hard to get that diagnosis, but it is a crucial thing to do. So, but what a lot of you probably will do, which I did as well, and which is probably why you're watching this video, is that you probably will have done research already, Dr. Google, looking up stuff on YouTube, and you're probably starting to get an idea of what might be wrong with you based on some of the symptoms that myself and other sufferers have talked about on YouTube and social media. So I remember before I had the diagnosis, I was pretty certain something was wrong with me in terms of the balance system going off or going wrong or going funny, because I could see people reporting symptoms like the photophobia, the extreme light, the motion sensitivity, the kind of visual overload, the derealization stuff. So I knew that it was in this kind of area or ballpark or remit. And then I never actually heard of vestibular migraine. I thought I might have some kind of sort of long-term effect of labyrinthitis or something that had affected my balance. But then when I finally then saw a specialist for me, Mrs. Douglas, who's in the South Yorkshire region. So if you're in the region, or if you can get into the region and get an appointment with her, I'd recommend it, because she knows the stuff when it comes to vestibular stuff. But when I saw her, she then was able to diagnose vestibular migraine. I think there's 2 crucial things that led her to that diagnosis, on top of what I've already listed. So the photophobia, which is common in regular migraine anyway, and then also that there was a history of migraines in my family. So my dad suffered from them. My twin brother had them when he was a youngster, that he grew out of them. So it's there, it's in my blood, I suppose, in my DNA, in my genes. And that was a crucial couple of points that led her to the diagnosis of vestibular migraine. So as I said, I'd never heard of it. My mum and dad never had it at the time, so my dad was actually with me in that appointment. So as I said, I knew I had something kind of probably going wrong in the balance system, but then I got the actual diagnosis of vestibular migraine from the specialist. So I would recommend you all try and get to see a specialist and jump beyond that. If you're in the UK, jump beyond that GP level, ask for a referral. You might have to pay a bit of money, it's the way things are at the moment, but I always say it's money well spent if it's going to get you on the road to recovery and to start to get your life back on track and all those kind of things. And then the fourth, I'll probably leave it to 4 questions, so I don't want this video to be too long, but then the kind of fourth question I kind of get asked, which is quite a wide question, but I tend to get asked, what are the most common symptoms, or what symptoms do you have? So it can vary from people to people, but I experienced some of the common ones. So I had photophobia, which was sort of really sensitive to light. I had motion sensitivity, where like traffic or watching football, the motion was not right. That would then lead to sensory overload because it was just too much for, I suppose, my brain to process. And I'd get like I'd feel very faint, and it would all go all white, and I would think I was going to pass out. And I remember a remedy for it, a quick remedy, was always to put my sunglasses on, which then seemed to reduce the overload of my senses, and then my body could kind of, I suppose, settle back down. I think that feeling of lightheadedness and feeling all the world going all white, and that feeling you're going to faint, I think that is actually your body and your brain trying to give yourself, it's trying to trip out, basically. It gets an overload of senses, so light, motion, probably noise for some people, and then it thinks, right, I need to rescue the body here. So it starts to almost make you pass out to get you out of the situation. That's what I think it is. I don't know that for sure, but that's what I think it could be. So I had that. I didn't get the room like swinging around like proper vertigo like some people do, but I felt like slightly off balance. And then when I had some tests done by a vestibular physio, who was really useful, actually, really, really knowledgeable, I had some of the symptoms that suggested there was something wrong with the vestibular system. So I remember she got me to, shut my eyes and then walk up and down on the spot. And I didn't realise that I actually had moved across the room when I opened my eyes. So there's some, and then I had a slight wobble in the eye that she did a test for. So I did have some of those symptoms. Obviously, I've already mentioned it already, but anxiety was a big one for me. It's kind of like, I seem to remember, when I had the actual first attack, which was at the football match, the anxiety was terrible because I thought I was going to die, basically. I thought I was having a heart attack or my breathing was going to stop. But then I noticed as the week progressed after that, and I started to get more of the symptoms I've just spoken about, like persistently. They were like there more, and they would ease off. I seem to remember they'd ease off a bit towards the end of the day, but then they'd be there again, and then it got a hold of me. But I remember at the same time, I could feel my anxiety growing and growing and growing as those symptoms grew and grew and grew. So obviously anxiety was a big symptom for me. And then I had a couple of sort of stranger ones. So I used, for some reason, would get this weird face twitching down this side. So it was like almost like my nerves were reacting in some way to whatever was going on. I had breathing difficulties. So my breathing can still go funny now. And that is often a sign that I'm going to suffer from a few vestibular symptoms, or I'm going to maybe even have a relapse. I do get it sometimes and nothing happens, which is great, and that'll be the meds controlling. But when I had my relapse this year, I remember the breathing going funny very quickly. And then the other kind of weird symptom that goes hand in hand with the breathing a bit is, and I don't know whether I've done a video on this or spoken about it yet, but the other really odd one I had was it seemed to then affect my speech. So people listening to me said I was speaking just fine, but I almost felt like I couldn't get my words out. It's really bizarre, isn't it? So those are the most common symptoms I had. And then those slightly weirder symptoms at the end there is why I have a bit of a hypothesis that probably the vestibular stuff we're experiencing is probably a symptom of another issue perhaps with our nervous system. Now, I'm not saying that's anything to worry about at all, because we're not dead, are we? And it's not like MS or anything that had been picked up on by now. So I think there's something not right with our central nervous systems probably, and that could be genetic, it could be all sorts, but then that is triggered maybe by inflammation or hormones or a bad neck, whatever it may be in the body, IBS, and then that creates the vestibular symptoms, but then it's also creating some of these other weirder symptoms. Because for me, it doesn't quite make sense to me that if you had an issue with your vestibular system, that would affect your speech or your breathing. And then the other crucial thing as well is that when, as most of us do, if we've not had some kind of accident or damage sustained to the vestibular symptoms, when we have brain scan, MRI scan in that area, it shows nothing wrong with the vestibular nerves at all. So that tells me there's nothing actually wrong with the vestibular nerves. There's something else going on. And that's why I have the theory about the central nervous system being the root cause of all this. Plus a few other things. So if you have, for example, a stiff neck or problems in your neck, that can cause issues with the vestibular system. Of course it can, because it's so near. Hormones is another one. That's why a lot of women and girls suffer from the illness more commonly than men. I think it's got to be hormones that play a part in that. So hopefully that video was useful. I've kind of touched on four most common questions there. A fifth and interesting question I got asked the other week, actually, which I'll throw in here as a kind of like wild card, but they said, so what is kind of the downside of sort of speaking out about vestibular stuff or doing videos and being vocal about it, being public about it? I had to think about that because it's a really good question, but I would say the saddest part of it, I think, is it's kind of bittersweet, I suppose. So I will obviously get contact from people. I will perhaps become friends with them on Instagram or Facebook, or even exchange numbers sometimes. And it's sad when it's good, of course, when they get better, but it's sad that when I get certain ones who've done that and then they've like unfollowed me on Instagram or kicked me off the Facebook or whatever, which I get. I'm not that friend. I've never met them. I understand it, and it's also great that they're better and they've been able to move on. And perhaps I'm a representative for a lot of people. I probably represent a bad time for them, so I understand them. Once they're better from that, they want to confine me to history, which I totally understand. Don't worry about it. But it's a little sad there if I've got to know them a little bit and then they eject me from social media. So I'd say, and I'm not saying I'm perfect angel. There's one or two situations where perhaps I could have handled it better, but then it's meant I've lost touch with somebody. So I think that's probably the downside. It's good that they're feeling better and they're moved on, but it's a little sad once if I've got to know them and then I don't, they remove themselves from me basically. But big shout out though to all the lovely people though who I am still in contact with, and one of them in particular I've become very, very close to. She knows who she is if she ever watched this video. So I really appreciate that. So yeah, I thought it was an interesting question, so I threw that in for a wild card. So hopefully that's useful. Sort of quite a quick video, this one. Hopefully it's about less than 20 minutes, so hopefully it gets the thrust of what I want to say quickly. I'll try and do a few more videos in the coming year, of course. There's always sometimes new stuff to talk about. I know Ricardo wants me to do one about the gym, but I have to be so careful with that one because I need permission, because if I'm filming in the gym, and particularly if there's like women and girls working out around me, I could get smacked with a dumbbell, or I could get the law turning up and banging me off for a night down the police station, thinking I'm some kind of pervert. So it's a bit tricky, that one, but I'll keep thinking about it. So have a great new year. So please, if you're feeling poorly, go into 2024 with hope, because you will get better. Basically, you've just got to find that right treatment and get that diagnosis. So I wish you all the very best for 2024, and I will of course see you on the other side in 2024, which, as we know, in reality is just the next day, isn't it? So have a good one. Peace on earth. Be nice to each other, and remember, as you were, you'll be again.